Hello! Today I'm going to make a video about something we had a special request for. Someone asked what to do if your pieces aren't quite the right size and how to line them up and make them fit. In our July pattern this month we have a section we're going to be putting together, and you've pieced together several pieces and you're going to need to add a strip to them. And today I want to show you what to do if your pieces are a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, what you can do to make it fit just right. So I have sewn together parts of my section, and then I'm going to need to add this long strip. And if you look right now, it looks like my strip is too long. I don't want to cut that strip because that strip is the size that my block needs to be. So what I want to do is figure out what I need to do to make these pieces work. First, I can tell you just by looking at this, I haven't pressed it well. So if I press this better, I know it will get a little bit longer and fix that problem. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Bring it to my iron, and I'm going to push that seam and hold it and give it a good little blast of steam to flatten it out. And I'm going to repeat that with this one over here. And I'm going to press that out. And I'll give this one a hit over here as well. Okay. Now just by doing a better pressing job, you can see it's a little bit closer to where it was. If your piece is off by more than just a little bit, you might want to go back and check your seam allowances to make sure that they're not too big, and rip it out and make a smaller seam allowance. That will definitely help you get it to the right size. Or also check your cutting to make sure that the pieces are cut to the size they're supposed to be. If you've done those things and you're off by just a smidge, don't panic, you don't have to start all over. You can make it fit. Fabric is stretchy, so you're going to be able to make it fit to adjust for that little bit of difference if you have it. Okay? So what you're going to do, I'm going to find the center of my long strip, and I'm going to mark it with a pin. I'm just folding it in half to find the center. And I'll put a pin in the fold line. And then I'm also going to find the center of this unit, which happens to be right at the seam, so that lets me know. Okay, I'm going to put these together and I'm going to pin right at the center, lining the two center marks up right there. And now, if I stretch it out, you can see I've got a little bit of extra on each end. So I'm going to take another pin and I'm going to match up those where they should be on each end. And now you'll see it's got a little bit of extra give in it, but we're going to be able to ease that in. Now what's important when you're trying to ease in a little bit of extra is to put the piece that's longer, the piece that has more fabric, closer to your feed dog. So that's going to be on the bottom when I sew. So this piece has a little extra. We'll flip it over and sew it through the machine with that on the bottom. I'm starting with them lined up nicely at the top. I took that pin out so I don't hit it. Using my 1/4 inch seam, I've measured and I know it's just right. So now what I'm going to do is I started sewing just to get it held in there. I'm going to go to the center point where I want it to line up, and I'm going to just pull just gently on it to stretch the top and make it even with the bottom. And now my feed dogs are going to feed that through. And I'm going to keep going till I get to that center pin and then stop. And then again, on the next pin, I'm going to stretch just a little bit. The top one gets stretched, the bottom one doesn't need to be stretched. I have a point I'm going to be watching here as I go through. And I'm going to sew. Remove my pin. And then I'll bring it up to my ironing board and I'll press it back. Set the seam. And push the seam open. And now if you look at that, you can see it has lined up at each end perfectly. I'm going to repeat that with this one. After you've sewn your bottom unit together, you're going to add a long strip above the top of it. If it's off by just a little bit, you can again ease it in and stretch it in to make it fit. If it's off by more, again, check your seam allowances, check that you've cut your pieces correct, because it shouldn't be off by more than a smidge just based on your seam allowance. So, just like the first time, you're going to fold the long piece in half to find the center. Put a finger press in there just to mark it, and then pin it on your fold. Then you're going to fold this piece in half and find the center, which again happens to be right on the seam line, right there, so I don't have to mark it, I know it's that seam. Then I'm going to place this right sides together and pin it. Then I'll flip it over and I'll work to line up those ends so they match. If you're off, always make sure you've cut your pieces exactly the right length, because if you cut them too long, that would be a reason why it's off. So make sure they're cut correctly and make sure the seam allowances are accurate. And then you can ease it in. Mine was pretty close on this one, so I don't have to ease much in. There's a little bit off on this end more. So there we go. Okay. So now I'm bringing it to my machine, and then you can sew through. And now, because fabric is stretchy, you're going to make it go where you want it. Use that to your advantage. Always put the bigger piece of fabric on the bottom. If it's a little bit longer, you can ease it in. If you have your top piece, if the piece with the piecing is longer and you have points you need to watch, you can mark those with pins so you know where they are if you have that one on the bottom. If it's a lot longer, check your seam allowance. Take a slightly bigger seam allowance if you need to. And I'm just tugging just gently to make sure these ends match up where they need to be. And the feed dogs will do their work. And then we bring it to the iron to press. And I use the edge of my iron to push that seam open so it goes nice and flat. It's always good to press from the top, because if you're pressing from the back, you can't see if there's a fold or a pucker on there. And there we go. So now I have my unit and they're all lining up nicely, and it will fit into the quilt where we need it to be. I hope this helps you get your pieces all lined up nice and straight. If you have any questions, just send me an email and we'll see what else we can help you with. Thanks.